If you're not a U.S. citizen, you may think that there's nothing you can do that would put you in the U.S. tax net. But there's something called the substantial presence test that you should be very concerned about if you're traveling to the U.S. We're going to tell you how to avoid becoming a U.S. taxpayer without even knowing it in this video. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson, and we talk a lot here at Nomad Capitalist to U.S. citizens who are trying to figure out how to legally go where they're treated best by reducing their taxes as U.S. expats. And it's tough to escape the U.S. tax net. In fact, impossible, really, as a U.S. citizen. You're always going to be tied to them. But then I'll hear from folks from Canada or from Australia, and they'll call me and say, hey, Andrew, thank God I'm not a U.S. citizen. I just visit the U.S., and I'm not worried about U.S. tax. Well, there's something called the substantial presence test that if you're spending time in the United States, you'll want to be aware of. Even if you're there as a tourist, this affects you. And I'm going to walk you through how it works and even give you a couple of examples of people that I've come across who've had problems with this. Now, obviously, we're not going to be giving formal tax advice on a YouTube video. I'm going to try and give you the broad strokes, and you should make sure that you have this set up properly for your own situation. But I remember getting a call from a guy a couple years ago who was the captain of a ship, and they had to dock in Florida, I think it was Miami, for a while, and they ended up staying there. The guy who was his client ended up wanting to stay in Florida for a while. They ended up docked in Miami for a number of months, and eventually realized, oh, I'm a U.S. taxpayer now. And it took him a couple of years to actually unravel the entire U.S. tax situation he had gotten himself into. He wasn't a U.S. citizen, didn't have a green card, had never been anything other than a tourist, but he spent too much time there. Now, a lot of people are aware of this 183-day rule that a lot of countries have. It's called the days test, and it's allegedly this rule where if you spend 183 days, you're going to pay tax. If you spend less, you won't be taxed. That's becoming a thing of folklore these days because it's not really that cut and dry. But in the case of the U.S., there is a cut and dry formula called the substantial presence test. Here's how it works. If you spend 31 days this year in the United States and 183 days this year, last year, and the year before combined, using their complicated formula, you are a U.S. taxpayer. And that means you're in the entire tax net. That means you've got all the bank account reporting. You've got everything. You're a U.S. taxpayer, and you're going to pay tax on your worldwide income. So let's go through the formula. This year's days. Look at how many days you're in the United States this year. Those days count as one. So let's say you were in the U.S. for 60 days this year. That's one. 60 days. Then you go to the previous year. Okay, let's say last year you spent double the time. You were there for 120 days. Those days count as 1/3. So you take 120, you divide by 3, now you've got 40. Let's say the year before that, 2 years ago, you were also in the U.S. for 120 days. Those days are divided by 6th. They count as 1/6. So you take 120, divide by 6, that's 20. So now you take 20 plus 40 plus 60. You're at 160 days. And the good news in this case is, okay, you're under the 183 days that you get all across those 3 years. You are not a victim of the substantial presence test. But you can see how just by spending relatively moderate amounts of time that you could easily get on your 90-day tourist visa if you have a visa waiver passport, that you could spend the time just by coming in and out, going to conferences, having a nice long summer vacation. You could easily, over the course of 3 years, trigger U.S. tax-paying obligations. You can do it in 1 year. You could just spend 183 days, and just as with any other country, you'll get hit right away. But if you're spending a good amount of time this year and you have visits in the past, those are going to count against you. So it's important that you use this formula to make sure that you're not going to get swept up into the U.S. tax net. A lot of people think, well, tourism doesn't count. It absolutely does count. There are some exceptions. You can have up to 24 hours transiting through the United States if you're going between two other countries, i.e., if you're flying from Mexico City to London through New York, and you're in New York for fewer than 24 hours, okay, that's not going to count. There's a whole list of exclusions. You can find it on the IRS website. But the number one thing to consider is making sure that you're tracking your days. I always talk to people about putting together a calendar of where they've been, because the IRS doesn't mess around. They don't even care, oh, my flight got canceled due to weather. They're not the weather people. They just care how long were you in the United States. So it's important that you're aware of this. And it's especially important that you're aware of this if you're on a B1, B2, or some other kind of visa where you have the ability to spend up to potentially 180 days at a time. That could be fatal for you from a tax perspective. So many US citizens come to me saying, Andrew, how do I manage and legally reduce or eliminate my tax because of this passport I have? Don't get into their situation just by spending too much time in the United States. I'm Andrew Henderson, and if you're looking for a way to legally reduce your taxes, build your freedom, and create wealth faster as a global citizen, then you've come to the right place. I want you to do 3 things right now. Number 1, click the button to subscribe to our channel. Make sure to get notifications so you never miss a new video. Number 2, get a copy of our #1 best-selling book, Nomad Capitalist, on Amazon and learn all the dozens of benefits of our lifestyle. And number 3, if you're already a 6 or 7-figure entrepreneur and you want to put these strategies in place, go to nomadcapitalist.com and find out how to get some help.